problems that we have to discuss and we have to deal with it. But instead of that, instead of letting us speak about it, this kind of terrified, a terrorized situation comes out, we're not allowed to speak. And even the court was kind of intimidated to come into such a judgment, I feel sometimes. Because you remember all these kind of discussions, all these kind of rumors coming up before the verdict, and then immediately the next 2-3 days, and the questions, the discussions, especially clinging on terms like rights coming up. So is it a right or is it a communal a genocide? Such questions Javeed has discussed. But the question of rights coming up in different parts of India, rumors coming out. So the whole court, the judiciary itself was kind of intimidated to come into this kind of a verdict. At one point, that is there. And then, as the previous speaker has pointed out, this particular judgment is dividing India's history into two. Okay, as we say, the post Babri Masjid and pre-Babri Masjid episode, this also, the Ayodhya verdict itself is dividing India's history into two. And we need to engage with it. We cannot just keep quiet about it. And we have to devise new ways, new methods of dealing with these issues. How are we going to discuss? We need new terminology as such, new ways, new methodology to deal with these issues that have to be dealt with. Because if the court is going to take into consideration, if the court is kind of relocating Rama from the epic and placing, giving him kind of a historicity, we have to deal with it. We have to we cannot just keep quiet and say that is the way it is, and for the sake of secularism we have to do it. So that kind of a response is not needed here, but rather creative. At the same time, it should be able to, but then we can also ask the question that whether there was another possibility. But then was even that kind of a question is not being dealt with. Because the moment, this NDTV started discussions on this particular verdict, the first few minutes we felt that maybe it's kind of there, the discussion is leading on somewhere, where Rajiv and all of them coming up and saying this kind of a fantastic Raj kind of decision. But immediately, after half an hour, all of them talking about reconciliation. So, is that the method? Is this the way to look into the whole issue? So we at least should try to problematize this context of secularism, this context of reconciliation, the context of peace. The movie that I talked about, it ends with the statement peace. Okay, it writes peace. So what kind of a peace? By making a whole community. They are kind of, you're treating them as kind of an important group. You don't have to engage with this thing. You should not speak about this thing. So kind of impotency is being attributed to a community, and you have to, here is your piece of cake, take that and leave kind of an attitude. So how are we going to look into this question? That as students of humanities, I think you should look into it from that perspective as well. And one more thing I wanted to say is about, how this court verdict looks into the question of Hindus and Muslims in India. It homogenizes the categories of Hindus and Muslims, because all Hindus are kind of, looking into Ram Lala's deity and looking into Ram Janmabhoomi as their sacred place. Is it so? So the homogenization that takes place through the mouthpiece of law also is to be engaged with. And then, another thing that we need to ask is, this verdict is actually trying to cancel out certain possibilities. It's trying to rule out certain possibilities, like how are we going to deal with the Babri Masjid episode now? How are we going to look into it? And when that is, so isn't a kind of justification of the demolition of the masjid itself? So that question we need to ask. And one more thing is this we talk about Ramchaputra and we talk about Sita Rasoi, but we keep quiet about, in the 1855 massacre that took place inside Babri Masjid. The whole lot of Muslims who took asylum inside the masjid during this particular moment were killed, and their graves have been in and around the premises of the masjid, and over that this Ramchaputra, and over the graves of those people, Ramchaputra and this Sita Rasoi, have been created. So So such questions like, how are we going to look into the justice behind these atrocities? How are we going to deal with the question of justice itself? So let us think about that. And let me again give you another image that came out in one of the national dailies in Kerala just after the court verdict. And it is related to Hyderabad, that's why I am trying to bring in that image here. Because the next day the paper came out with Hindus and Muslims rejoicing in front of, I don't know whether it's a manufactured image, in front of Charminar. Okay, one of the leading Malayalam dailies in Kerala came out with this image of Hindus and Muslims celebrating the verdict in front of Charminar. So this celebration, is it a real celebration, or is it a way of concealing other realities? So let us, as students of humanities, let us try to engage with these questions. Thank you. And once again, let me thank Dabmsa and also appreciate them for taking such an effort to have this kind of a discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherin. Now we have our next speaker, MD Ansari. He is from the Comparative Literature Department of University of Hyderabad. His recent work about Muslims of Malabar has created much discussion in Kerala. He is also editor of Secularism, Islam and Modernity, Selected Essays of Art and Humanity. Also, he is joint editor of
The story repeated reiterate some of the things. I start by thanking Dabmsa, particularly V. Ravichandra, the General Secretary, for the initiative and invitation. I also extend my welcome to the Chief Guest, Honorable Member of Parliament, and to Professors Javeed Alam, Jahangir, Sherin, Satyanarayan, as well as to all the other participants. This symposium, as has been said many times already, on Ayodhya verdict and its implications for the secular republic, probably got it right. It was a verdict on Ayodhya, and not on the Babri Masjid, or as the poster makes it very clear. Discussions on the internet refer to the judgment as a second demolition. As a matter of fact, it was actually the third demolition. If you take into account the dig by the Archaeological Survey of India, which in many ways concluded what the Conservatives had to do. As Irfan Habib recently put it, the whole business of excavating the floor of the Babri Masjid completed the demolition. The High Court verdict had evoked mixed reactions. For example, there was restrained jubilation, expressions of shock and incredulity, as well as sighs of relief. And I'm sure that people who have been checking the internet are already familiar with most of them. But let me just read some of them, just to reiterate certain things. One of them said, has the judiciary defined what exactly it means by the term Hindus and Muslims? Does Hindus include those of the backward castes and tribes, etc.? You can see the vein in this course. The second one quotes, a Muslim friend and colleague from Gujarat who works in a right-affected Muslim ghetto in Ahmedabad called immediately after hearing the judgment and said she is relieved and happy. Had been in the favor of Muslims, she was sure another riot would have happened. The third one, the last one, is from a different kind of voice. I am a normal working middle class, struggling to be modern Muslim of India. I believe that the judgment was based more on the fact that it never was ours, and we would never get it anyway. The fact of the matter is, I believe that I am nothing but a second-class citizen. Sad but true. This judgment has been accepted by many Muslims as a gift than a right. I just don't want any communal rights. Yeah, I'm sure that if you browse the internet, you will find many more and many different types also. As I said, the speakers before me have already raised most of the important concerns related to the verdict and the possible future verdict by the Supreme Court. Since I will not be dwelling on the intricacies of the three separate judgments, their overall dependence on a dubious ASI report, etc., etc. Rather, I would like to point to the rather disturbing tendency manifest in the verdict, that of reading and reducing religion to a pre-modern category. I'm sure the earlier speakers have hinted to it. I don't know whether they have actually framed it in that manner. That the verdict reduces again religion to a pre-modern category. Right from 1947, the Indian nation state has found many occasions to deploy a carrot and stick approach towards its minorities. It has always considered them as religious minorities, whose different practices are to be tolerated or given consideration, but not as political minorities, for whose protection there should be a clearly defined set of rights. These practices help to fix them as a minors. This was used by MP also, to fix them as minors of a growing up nation, ironically reinforcing a particular mindset and a ghettoization.